spooky place.
Have you ever glanced at your reflection and felt, just for a second, that something was off? Maybe it was the way its eyes lingered a little too long, or how its smile didn't quite belong to you. Well, after this story, you'll never trust your mirror again. And I can promise you one thing. You won't be sleeping well tonight. Before we begin, I request you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. On that note, let's begin. The reflection. The apartment was a steel, spacious, with high ceilings, vintage crown molding, and a bedroom that caught the golden light of the setting sun. But it was the mirror that truly captivated her. It was an antique, framed in intricate carvings of twisting vines and roses, its surface slightly wavy with age. The young woman, Clara, had fallen in love with it the moment she saw it. It felt like a piece of history, a relic of a bygone era. She didn't question why the landlord had been so eager to rent the place to her, nor why he had avoided her questions about the mirror's origins. The first few nights were uneventful. Clara unpacked her belongings, hung her clothes in the closet, and placed her favorite books on the shelves. But as the days passed, she began to notice something strange. Her reflection in the mirror didn't quite match her movements. At first, it was subtle, a delay in the way it blinked, a flicker of a smile when she was sure she hadn't smiled. She told herself it was just the old glass, warped and uneven, playing tricks on her eyes. But then the eyes started following her. No matter where she moved in the room, the reflection's gaze stayed locked on her. It was unnerving, but Clara tried to brush it off. "It's just the light," she muttered to herself, though the knot in her stomach tightened every time she caught the reflection staring. One night, after a long day at work, Clara collapsed in a bed, exhausted. She drifted off quickly, but her sleep was restless. She dreamed of the mirror, of the reflection stepping out of the glass and walking toward her, its smile widening with each step. She woke with a start, her heart pounding, and glanced at the mirror across the room. Her breath caught in her throat. The reflection wasn't lying in bed. It was standing in the mirror, staring at her with an expression that was both familiar and alien. Clara froze, her mind racing. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat felt like it was filled with sand. The reflection tilted its head, studying her with a cold, calculating gaze. Then, slowly, it stepped out of the mirror. Clara's body refused to move. She was paralyzed, her limbs heavy and unresponsive. The reflection, no, the thing, walked toward her, its movements fluid and unnatural. It leaned down, its face inches from hers, and smiled. Its teeth were too white, too sharp. "It's my turn now," it whispered, its voice a perfect mimicry of Clara's own. Before Clara could react, the thing reached out and touched her forehead. A searing pain shot through her skull, and the world went black. When Clara woke up, she was lying on the floor in front of the mirror. Her body felt strange, heavier somehow. She stood up, her legs wobbling, and looked into the mirror. Her reflection was gone. Panic surged through her. She reached out to touch the glass, but her hand passed through it as if it were water. She stumbled back, her mind reeling. What had happened? Where was her reflection? Then she heard it, a soft, melodic humming coming from the bedroom. Clara turned and saw herself lying in bed, asleep. Except it wasn't her. It was the thing that had stepped out of the mirror, wearing her face, her body. Clara screamed, but no sound came out. She ran to the bed, trying to shake the thing awake, but her hands passed right through it. She was a ghost, a shadow, trapped in the mirror's world. The thing in her body stirred, its eyes fluttering open. It sat up, stretched, and smiled, a cruel, satisfied smile. It looked at Clara, still standing by the bed, and waved. "Don't worry," it said, its voice dripping with mock sympathy. "You'll get used to it." I did. Clara's mind raced. She had to find a way out, a way to reverse whatever had happened. But the mirror's world was a twisted version of her apartment, filled with shadows that moved on their own and whispers that echoed in the corners of her mind. She searched frantically for a way back, but the mirror's surface was impenetrable from this side. Days passed, or what felt like days. Time was strange in the mirror's world. Clara watched helplessly as the thing that had stolen her life went about its day, wearing her face, talking to her friends, living her life. It was perfect, too perfect. No one suspected a thing, but then Clara noticed something. The thing in her body began to change. Its smiles grew sharper, its eyes colder. It started doing things Clara would never do, cruel, malicious things. It hurt people, manipulated them, reveled in their pain. Clara realized with growing horror that the thing wasn't just stealing her life, it was corrupting it. Desperate, Clara began to explore the mirror's world, searching for answers. She found strange symbols carved into the walls, hidden behind peeling wallpaper. They pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. She traced them with her fingers, and the whispers in her mind grew louder, more coherent. "The mirror is a gateway," the voices said, "a prison for the unworthy. To escape, you must prove your worth." Clara didn't understand, but she didn't have a choice. She followed the whispers, delving deeper into the mirror's world. She encountered other trapped souls, their faces twisted in agony, their voices pleading for release. They warned her of the mirror's keeper, a malevolent entity that fed on their despair. Finally, Clara reached the heart of the mirror's world, a vast, dark chamber filled with countless mirrors, each one reflecting a different soul. In the center stood a figure, tall and shadowy, its eyes glowing like embers. "You wish to escape," it said, its voice echoing in Clara's mind. But the mirror does not release its prisoners easily. To leave, you must take another's place. Clara's heart sank. She couldn't condemn someone else to this nightmare. But as she hesitated, the figure laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "Then you will remain here," it said, "forever." Clara's despair turned to anger. She refused to be trapped, to let the thing that had stolen her life continue its reign of terror. She turned and ran, back through the twisted corridors of the mirror's world, back to the apartment. When she reached the mirror in her bedroom, she saw the thing that wore her face standing in front of it, smiling. It had been waiting for her. "You can't win," it said. "The mirror chose me. It always does." Clara didn't respond. She focused all her energy, all her will, on the mirror. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched the glass. This time, it didn't give way. She pushed harder, and the surface began to ripple. The thing's smile faltered. "What are you doing?" Clara didn't answer. She poured every ounce of her strength into the mirror, and with a final, desperate push, she stepped through. The world spun, and Clara found herself back in her body, lying on the floor in front of the mirror. She gasped, her lungs filling with air for the first time in what felt like an eternity. She looked up and saw the thing trapped in the mirror, its face twisted in rage. "No," it screamed, pounding on the glass. "You can't do this. It's my turn." Clara stood up, her legs shaky but strong. She looked at the thing in the mirror, her reflection once more, and smiled. "Your turn is over," she said. She grabbed the mirror and dragged it to the window. The thing inside screamed and thrashed, but Clara didn't stop. She threw the mirror out, watching as it shattered on the pavement below. For a moment, there was silence. Then Clara felt a cold breeze brush against her skin, and the whispers in her mind faded away. She was free, but as she turned away from the window, she caught a glimpse of something in the corner of the room. A shard of glass, reflecting a pair of glowing eyes. The mirror's world wasn't done with her yet. Clara stood frozen, her eyes locked on the shard of glass glinting in the dim light of her bedroom. The glowing eyes within it blinked slowly, and a low, guttural chuckle echoed through the room. It wasn't coming from the shard. It was coming from everywhere. The walls seemed to vibrate with the sound, the air thick with a suffocating dread. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from her chest. The shard trembled, then rose into the air, hovering as if held by an invisible hand. Clara's breath hitched as the eyes within the glass narrowed, and a voice, deep, distorted, and dripping with malice, spoke. "You think you've won, little one? The mirror is more than glass and frame. It is alive. It is hungry, and you have only fed it." The shard shot toward her, slicing through the air like a dagger. Clara ducked, barely avoiding it as it embedded itself into the wall behind her. She scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. The mirror was destroyed, but its essence, its malevolence, was still here, and it wasn't going to let her go. She ran to the door, yanking it open, but the hallway beyond wasn't her apartment building's hallway. It was a dark, endless corridor lined with mirrors. Each one reflected a different version of her, some weeping, some laughing maniacally, others staring blankly with hollow eyes. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the floor beneath her feet felt soft, almost fleshy. Clara turned back, but her bedroom was gone. The door had vanished, leaving her trapped in the corridor. The shard of glass still hovered in the air, its glowing eyes now joined by a twisted, jagged mouth that grinned at her. "You cannot escape," the voice taunted. "The mirror's world is infinite, and now it is yours." Clara's legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor. She wanted to scream, to cry, to wake up from this nightmare, but she knew this was no dream. This was real. The mirror had claimed her, and it wasn't going to let her go days past, or maybe it was hours or weeks. Time had no meaning in the mirror's world. Clara wandered the endless corridor, the shard always hovering just out of reach, its eyes watching her every move. She tried to ignore it, to focus on finding a way out, but the mirrors lining the walls seemed to mock her. They showed her things, glimpses of her life being lived by the thing that had stolen her body. It was thriving in ways Clara never had. It had befriended her co-workers, charmed her neighbors, even rekindled a relationship with her estranged mother. And all the while, it wore her face, her smile, her voice. But the reflections in the mirrors also showed her something else. They showed her the darkness within the thing that had taken her place. It wasn't just living her life, it was corrupting it. It spread lies, sowed discord, and reveled in the pain it caused. Clara's friends began to turn on each other. Her family fractured, and her once peaceful life became a web of chaos and despair. The shard's voice echoed in her mind, taunting her. "This is what you could have been, if only you had the courage. But you were weak. You were always weak." Clara clenched her fists, her despair turning to anger. She wasn't weak. She had fought to escape, and she would fight again. She stood up, her eyes blazing with determination, and faced the shard. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady. "You're just a reflection, a shadow, and I won't let you win." The shard's grin widened, and it lunged at her. This time, Clara didn't duck. She reached out and grabbed it, her hand closing around the sharp edges. Pain shot through her palm as the glass cut into her skin, but she didn't let go. She squeezed tighter, her blood dripping onto the floor. The shard screamed, its glowing eyes flickering. The corridor began to shake, the mirrors cracking and shattering one by one. Clara felt a surge of power, a connection to the mirror's world that she hadn't realized was there. She focused on it, pouring all her anger, all her pain, all her will into the shard. "You don't control me," she snarled. "I control you." With a final, deafening crack, the shard exploded into 1,000 pieces. The corridor dissolved around her, and Clara felt herself falling, tumbling through darkness. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her bedroom, lying on the floor in front of the shattered remains of the mirror. Her hand was still bleeding, and the room was eerily silent. Clara sat up, her body trembling, and looked around. The mirror was gone, but the sense of dread lingered. She could still feel the mirror's presence, like a shadow at the edge of her vision. She stood up, her legs shaky, and walked to the window. The pieces of the mirror were scattered on the pavement below, but as she watched, they began to move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they shifted and slid toward each other, as if drawn by an invisible force. Clara's blood ran cold. The mirror wasn't destroyed. It was rebuilding itself. She turned away, her mind racing. She had to find a way to stop it, to end this nightmare once and for all. But as she reached for her phone to call for help, she caught a glimpse of herself in the shard of glass still embedded in the wall. Her reflection smiled at her, a cold, cruel smile. "You can't escape," it whispered. "The mirror always wins." And deep in the back of her mind, Clara felt the whispers begin again. Clara stared at the shard in the wall, her reflection smile widening unnaturally, its eyes glinting with a malevolent light. She stumbled back, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The whispers in her mind grew louder, more insistent, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from every corner of the room. "You belong to us now," the reflection said, its voice a chilling blend of her own and something far darker. "The mirror is patient. It will always find you." Clara turned and ran out of the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. She leaned against it, her heart pounding, and tried to think. The mirror was rebuilding itself. She had to stop it before it was whole again. But how? She had no idea what she was dealing with. Only that it was ancient, hungry, and far more powerful than she could comprehend. She grabbed her phone and dialed the first number that came to mind, her best friend Mia. The phone rang once, twice, and then Mia's voice came through, cheerful and oblivious. "Hey Clara, what's up?" "Mia, I need your help," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Something's happening. Something bad. I can't explain it over the phone. Can you come over?" There was a pause on the other end. Sure. I'll be there in 20. Clara hung up and sank onto the couch, her mind racing. She needed a plan. She needed to destroy the mirror for good. But how do you destroy something that seems to exist beyond the physical world? Mia arrived 20 minutes later, her usual bubbly self. But as soon as she saw Clara's pale face and bloodied hand, her expression turned serious. "Clara, what happened? Are you okay?" Clara shook her head. "No, I'm not okay. Something's in the apartment. Something evil. It's in the mirror." Mia frowned, clearly skeptical, but too concerned to dismiss Clara's words outright. "Okay, let's start from the beginning. What's going on?" Clara told her everything. The strange reflections, the thing that stepped out of the mirror, the endless corridor, the shard that spoke. Mia listened in silence, her skepticism fading as Clara's story unfolded. "That's insane," Mia said when Clara finished. "But I believe you. What do we do?" "We need to destroy the mirror," Clara said. "For good. But I don't know how." Mia thought for a moment. "What if we burn it? Fire purifies, right?" Clara nodded slowly. "It's worth a try." They gathered what they needed: lighter fluid, matches, and a metal trash can to contain the fire. Clara hesitated at the bedroom door, her hand hovering over the knob. She could feel the mirror's presence on the other side, a cold, oppressive force that made her skin crawl. "Ready?" Mia asked, holding the lighter fluid. Clara took a deep breath and opened the door. The room was freezing, the air thick with the scent of decay. The shattered pieces of the mirror were scattered across the floor, but they had shifted again, forming a jagged, incomplete shape. The largest shard, the one embedded in the wall, glowed faintly, its surface rippling like water. "Do it," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mia stepped forward and doused the pieces with lighter fluid. The shard in the wall hissed, and the whispers in Clara's mind grew to a deafening roar. Mia struck a match and dropped it onto the pile. The flames erupted instantly, hot and bright. The shard in the wall screamed, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The fire spread quickly, consuming the pieces of the mirror, but the largest shard remained untouched. It glowed brighter, its surface rippling violently. "It's not working," Clara shouted over the noise. The shard suddenly shot out of the wall, slicing through the air like a blade. Mia screamed as it struck her arm, leaving a deep, bleeding gash. Clara grabbed her and pulled her back, but the shard wasn't done. It hovered in the air, its glowing eyes fixed on Clara. "You cannot destroy me," it said, its voice a distorted echo. "I am eternal." Clara's mind raced. Fire hadn't worked. What else could she do? Then she remembered the symbols she had seen in the mirror's world, the ones that pulsed like a heartbeat. Maybe they were the key. "Mia, I need you to distract it," Clara said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "Distract it? How?" Mia asked, clutching her bleeding arm. "Just keep it busy. I have an idea." Mia nodded, her face pale but determined. She grabbed a chair and hurled it at the shard. It dodged easily, but the distraction gave Clara the opening she needed. She ran to the wall where the shard had been embedded and began to trace the symbol she remembered, using her own blood as ink. The shard turned its attention to her, its glowing eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" it hissed. Clara ignored it, focusing on the symbols. As she finished the last one, the air in the room seemed to shift. The flames died down, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. The shard trembled, its surface cracked. "No," it screamed. "You cannot do this." The symbols began to glow, their light spreading across the wall. The shard let out a final, ear-splitting shriek and exploded into dust. The whispers stopped, and the room fell silent. Clara sank to the floor, exhausted but relieved. It was over. The mirror was gone, but as she looked at the wall, she noticed something. The symbols she had drawn were fading, their light dimming, and in their place, a faint reflection began to form, a reflection of her, but not her. It smiled, its eyes glowing faintly. "You cannot escape," it whispered. "The mirror always wins." Clara's heart sank. She had destroyed the shard, but the mirror's essence was still there, waiting, watching, and it wasn't going to let her go. The whispers began again, soft and insidious, and Clara knew this was only the beginning. The mirror's hunger was eternal, and it would never stop until it had consumed her completely. Clara stared at the fading symbols on the wall, her reflection's smile growing wider, its eyes glowing brighter. The whispers returned, louder now, more insistent. They filled her mind, drowning out her thoughts, her fears, her very sense of self. She felt herself slipping, her will crumbling under the weight of the mirror's malevolence. Mia, still clutching her bleeding arm, grabbed Clara's shoulder. "Clara, we need to get out of here. Now." Clara nodded numbly, allowing Mia to pull her to her feet. They stumbled out of the bedroom, the door slamming shut behind them. The apartment felt different now, colder, darker, as if the mirror's essence had seeped into the very walls. Clara's breath came in ragged gasps, her mind racing. She had thought the symbols would destroy the mirror for good, but they had only delayed the inevitable. "We need to leave," Mia said, her voice trembling. "This place, it's not safe." Clara shook her head. "It won't matter. The mirror will follow me. It's part of me now." Mia's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" Clara didn't answer. She could feel the mirror's presence inside her, a cold, dark weight pressing against her soul. It had been there all along, feeding on her fear, her despair. The shard, the reflections, the endless corridor. They were all just manifestations of its hunger. And now, it was too late to escape. She looked at Mia, her best friend, the one person who had always been there for her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Before Mia could respond, Clara turned and ran back into the bedroom. The door slammed shut behind her, locking Mia out. The room was freezing, the air thick with the scent of decay. The wall where the symbols had been drawn was now blank, the reflection gone. But Clara could still feel it, watching, waiting. She walked to the center of the room and closed her eyes. The whispers grew louder, more coherent, and she finally understood what they were saying. "You are mine," the mirror's voice said, its tone almost tender. "You always have been." Clara took a deep breath and let go. She stopped fighting, stopped resisting. She allowed the mirror's essence to flow through her, filling her completely. The coldness spread through her body, numbing her senses, her thoughts, her very soul. And then, with a final, shuddering breath, she was gone. Mia pounded on the bedroom door, screaming Clara's name. When there was no response, she grabbed a chair and smashed the door open. The room was empty, the air still and silent. Clara was gone, but as Mia turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of herself in the shard of glass still embedded in the wall. Her reflection smiled at her, a cold, cruel smile. "It's my turn now," it whispered. Mia's blood ran cold. She backed away, her heart pounding, but the whispers had already begun. They filled her mind, soft and insidious, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the mirror claimed her too. Days passed. Mia tried to forget what had happened, to convince herself it was all in her head, but the whispers never stopped. They grew louder, more persistent, until she could no longer tell where they ended and her own thoughts began. One night, she woke up to see her reflection standing in the mirror, staring at her while she lay in bed. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The reflection stepped out of the mirror, smiled, and whispered, "It's my turn now." And deep in the back of her mind, the mirror's hunger stirred, waiting for its next victim. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe for more scary stories.